Food by Emily Carr. 40 and more fickle appetites strolled into the sand dining room, unenthusiastically took their places at table. A big part of the TB treatment was eating. Eating was compulsory. If patients refused to eat, the SAN refused to keep them as patients. Dr. McNair and matron stood at a side table and served. Were Dr. Bottle present, she dictated the helpings, cruel mountains of meat, vegetables, and pudding helpings that would stagger the appetite of healthy men and women and were positively loathsome to invalids. The maids brought the hateful plates and slapped them down before each patient. You felt pull together and nausea, struggle in disgust, and revolt as each patient surveyed her pile. When all were served, doctor and matron took their places, one at either end of the long table, and started animated conversation. One by one the patients picked up their knives and forks and began to attack the food. It was bravely done. There was an oldish schoolmaster who had been attacked by TB, a man accustomed to exact, not yield obedience. I saw this man scowl at his helping of spinach with a little boy's fury. I saw little boy's tears come into his eyes, tumble down his cheeks, hide their shame in his man's beard. He beckoned a maid and whispered. In turn, she whispered in the doctor's ear. Clear and stern, Dr. McNair enunciated so that everyone could hear. If Mr. Dane cannot eat spinach, substitute a double helping of carrot. The oldish man smiled his thanks. Sorry, doctor. Never could, even as a boy. His neighbor, a florid woman, nodded. I entertain the same attitude toward carrots, Mr. Dane. Munch, munch, munch. Miss Dobbin, the woman opposite, chewed doggedly, determined to see the treatment through. She scorned the whimperings of the little neurotic on her left, the yawning envelope pinched between the knees of the hypocrite Marmaduke Jepson on her right. Between chews, Miss Dobbin could not resist peeping to see if Marmaduke's flip had landed true. His policy was to engage Doctor in an eye-to-eye conversation while he flipped. Great portions of his food flew into the waiting envelope. Without so much as a glance, his aim was accurate. Doctor was always holding Jepson up as an example to the rest, too, because of the speed with which he made clean his plate. Not that it's made much of an impression on your bones yet, Mr. Jepson. It will, though. Patience. Courage. Thank you, doctor, thank you. I try to be a credit to the SAN. Credit, ugh, grunted Dobbin as Jepson's baked potato landed in the envelope. Miss Brett laid down her knife and fork, closed her eyes. Just for 1 second she must shut out the sight of food. She heard the doctor say, If the weather holds, we shall have strawberries next week. Food, food, always food. A maid bent close. Are you going to finish, Miss Brett? A silent headshake. The maid removed the meat plate, substituted a generous cut of roly-poly pudding, oozing jam. The struggle began all over again. Miss Brett knew that the plate of meat and vegetables would be taken straight to her room and must be eaten some time before supper. The jam roly-poly would join it there unless... She severed 6 jammy little pieces, bolted them one after another like pills, controlling herself heroically against being sick. Suppose you can't? Suppose you won't? I once asked a patient. At bedtime, it will be removed and a huge bowl of Banger's gruel substituted for it. Well, suppose you refuse that too? The patient rolled her eyes round her head like an owl. You couldn't. Your people would be asked. Well, they'd be asked to remove you, not giving the treatment a chance, or Dr. Bottle's reputation either. Drat Dr. Bottle and her reputation. Quite so, but your people, they have made sacrifices. You can't let them down, and there's always the chance you might infect someone at home. Besides making life uncomfortable for them, open windows, special food. Every Saturday, Mrs. Cranley dined with us. She came from a distance to visit her son and her daughter. Both were patients in the SAN. The son was bad, the daughter only slightly infected. Mrs. Cranley had already lost 2 children with TB. She was taking no chances with Kate. In spite of her children that were dead and her children that were sick, Mrs. Cranley was hideously buoyant and optimistic. The staff alluded to her as that brave soul. They said she was a moral uplift to the SAN. She paraded her fortitude to such an extent and hoisted her buoyancy to such a pinnacle it made everyone else slump. Mrs. Cranley's favorite food was cabbage. The SAN garden excelled in the great crisp monsters. All of the cabbage tribe were represented. Miss Brown the gardener, Dr. Bottle, who was always present at Saturday's dinner, and Mrs. Cranley lapped up the flabby green with relish, discoursing all through the meal on the merits of the different species. Mrs. Cranley kept up a running undertone. Beautiful cabbage, beautiful cabbage. The patients nicknamed her Beautiful Cabbage. Then Dr. Bottle would insist that everyone must have a second helping. She inflated over the SAN's beautiful cabbage till she nearly burst. It was a privilege to be able to eat homegrown cabbage such as this. Beautiful cabbage, echoed Mrs. Cranley all over until we hated cabbage of every kind, human or vegetable. Marmaduke Jepson sat near the dining room door. He always sprang from his seat to open it for Dr. McNair. When he swept from the head of the table down the long dining hall, Dr. McNair, what with her great height, the flowing dinner gowns she always affected, and all the dignity she had at her command, looked like a ship in full sail advancing. Marmaduke sprang as usual, took out a perfumed florid handkerchief with a flourish, fluttered it and undid its folds, and he pulled out more than a handkerchief, plop, right in front of Doctor's feet, slapped the pancake Marmaduke should have eaten at table. Doctor had to detour to avoid treading on it. Marmaduke swooped. Too late. The doctor swept by with a pointed, "See you at rest hour, Mr. Jepson." "Good Lord, Dane!" Marmaduke called to the spinach objector. "Did you see her face? Quick, let's make a prompt getaway for our walk." They took hats and sticks from the half-rack and bolted. "1 minute, Dane." Jepson took his cane and bored a hole into the soil of the garden, widening and deepening the bore to accommodate the pancake and an envelope very fat. Carefully, he covered them with earth. The lady gardeners could have told a vast undercrop of envelopes addressed to Marmaduke Jepson, Esquire, in the garden. They did not. Marmaduke always had a smile for them. always a compliment.